Hey, Mr. Traeger here. This is our last vodcast of the semester. So it's sayonara, arrivederci, hasta la vista, see you later, all those other things. So this is our last one. So today we're going to be talking about treatment and sobriety. We've been talking about alcoholism. We've been talking about addiction. We're in the middle of talking about drugs and classifications. I actually just watched episode of Moonshiners tonight. So there's just all kinds of stuff going on with substances and chemicals. So what we're going to be talking about tonight is kind of the opposite of what the last podcast was, which was the addiction wheel. Which this picture here should look familiar. This was from the last podcast talking about the process of addiction. You use a drug, you abuse it, you become psychologically dependent, you become physically addicted, and because of that, you use it, and the cycle continues. All right. Today we're going to be talking about the treatment wheel. So what happens when a person realizes that they are out of control, that the drug is in control of their life? How do they regain that control back? All right. Well, the first step in the treatment wheel is to first admit that you've got a problem. If a person doesn't admit they have a problem with a drug or with a chemical, then there's no reason for them to get treatment for it. And so the first step in any kind of treatment process is for the user to admit that they no longer control, the drug is in control, and that they need help or they need some kind of assistance to be able to stop using. That's a very difficult thing for people to do, is to admit that they've lost control. All right. The second step in the treatment process is they have to quit using. Now, a lot of times people, the quitting part of it isn't as difficult in the beginning. Because if they're admitting that they have a problem, they know that they have to stop using, and so they full-heartedly say, I'm never going to drink again, I'm never going to smoke again, I'm never going to shoot up or snort or whatever it is that they're doing. I'm never going to do that again. All right? The problem is that after they quit, their body is going to go through some changes, because remember we talked about physical addiction, the body craves it, the body needs it. And so what's going to happen is they're going to start to go through those physical withdrawals, the shakes, the it could be irritability, it could be nausea, it could be they can't sleep. There could be a whole ton of different types of withdrawal symptoms that they're going to experience. And all they need to do is use a little bit of the drug, and those withdrawal symptoms will go away. And so that makes it very hard to not use the drug, because they know at that point in time, if they use some, they're going to feel better. All right. And this is the process that we call detox. All right. Now, a lot of times when people are trying to stop using a drug and they quit, a lot of times they go into a detox facility for a period of time, a short period of time, to detox their system of all those chemicals. And then after they detox, they've gone through the withdrawal process and all that kind of stuff, then they can start working on the recovery stuff, and then continue their sobriety. So the good thing about this step is that the withdrawal symptoms won't last forever. They're going to be, there's going to be a period of time that they experience that, but it's going to go away as long as they stop using the drug. As long as they don't start using again, those withdrawal symptoms will go away. So eventually that will kind of erase itself. All right. And then we can start in with the last phase of the treatment wheel, which is the recovery part of it. And that's where the real work is done in terms of learning how to live the rest of their life without using. Because remember, we talked about once a person's physically addicted, they no longer have control anymore. So an addict can't use a little bit. They've lost that ability. That's that loss of control thing. Once they start using or drinking or smoking, they can't stop. They can't stop themselves from doing it. And then the whole cycle of addiction continues again. So that's the trick with recovery. Now, what happens is, as long as that I continue to admit, I continue to not use the drug, I remain in recovery, and that's kind of how this treatment wheel goes, sort of opposite of what the addiction wheel was, is that I have to continually do this. It's not something that I can say I'm cured. I'm no longer addicted. An addict is always addicted. A lot of times they call it's someone who's in recovery or recovering. They're a recovering addict, meaning they're still doing it. After 20 years, they're still a recovering addict, because they know if they start using again, they're going to be right back into that crazy cycle of addiction. All right? So the recovery process puts you back in control, and that's the whole issue, is that you are the one deciding what you're going to do. And most of the time, in most treatment programs, it's you decide each day. I'm not worried about tomorrow, but today I'm not going to use. And that's all they focus on, because now they're back in control. Now, what kind of recovery options do they have? All right. There's different types of recovery or treatment options that people have. The first type is what's called an inpatient treatment. And an inpatient treatment is where they actually go into a facility for anywhere from 30, 60, 90 days. And they live there, they get their meals there, they get their treatment there. It's a more intensive type of treatment. A lot of times these might be court mandated. It might be that you see on like the intervention TV shows. They go to a treatment facility for usually 90 days is pretty common. And that's where they stay and they deal with the recovery in that facility. All right, that's inpatient. Then there's outpatient recovery. And outpatient is you go to a facility, you go to an office, you go to a place for your treatment, but you still live at home. You still have a job, you still go to school, you still do those things, but you might go to a counselor, you might go to a therapist, maybe once a day, maybe once a week, maybe twice a week, or depends on whatever your treatment setup is. But you go to that place, do the treatment, you live at home and kind of have your normal life. All right, and then you have what's called a self-management group, and this is a lot of people have learned a different self-management groups, which you're going to go through in a second. But this is a non-professional group of people, usually volunteers or usually groups of recovering addicts themselves, that help people manage their recovery, that help people stay accountable to their decision not to use. All right, and so these groups are things like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, AA. All right, there's Al-Anon, there's Alateen, there's some breakdowns to it. Okay, so I'm going to explain each one of them because it's easy to get them confused. All right, AA or NA which stands for Narcotics Anonymous, is basically support and maintenance for the actual addict themselves. All right, they're going to AA meetings. I'm sure most of us have heard of this before. And these things are held all over the country. I mean, you can go into almost any newspaper and you can find on almost any given day there's an AA meeting going on somewhere. And they're anonymous. There's no records. There's no sign-up sheets where you put a name and an address and all that kind of stuff. Hence the term anonymous. All right. And so you can go anywhere in the country. You're on vacation in Florida, you can find an AA group there if you need to go to a meeting. All right. But AA or NA is specifically for the addict. All right. Then there's Al-Anon, and Al-Anon is primarily a group that serves families that are dealing with an addict, and it's helping them deal with codependency, which codependency means where a person or a family has started to depend on the other person's addiction or the other person's drug use, and so they've gotten used to them using those drugs or alcohol or whatever, and so they become dependent on that behavior themselves, and so then they learn how to break that vicious cycle of codependency. That's kind of what Al-Anon is for. It's for the family to help the addict and to make those adjustments into a sober lifestyle. All right, and then there's Alateen. And Alateen is support, the same kind of deal as Al-Anon. It's support and maintenance for specifically teenagers and older kids in a family to deal with specific stresses of dealing with a parent, usually, that's dealing with an addiction. And how do they fit in, and how do they help the healing process when they're going through a traumatic event, as a teenager in terms of just growing up and now also dealing with an addicted parent or family member. All right, that's what Alateen is. A lot of people think Alateen is for teenage addicts, and that's not really the case. If there's a teenager that's dealing with an addiction, they're going to go to AA or they're going to go to NA. All right, they may have teen chapters of AA or NA, but that's going to be what they go to is those groups. Alateen is for a teenager who's not using, not addicted, but has a family member that is. Al-Anon is not for an addicted person; it's for the family of the addicted person. So these are some of the different self-management types most commonly out there to help addicts maintain their recovery, maintain their sobriety throughout life. All right. So let's look at how these two wheels work together. Now we've already talked about the wheel on the right, the crazy cycle, the drug addiction wheel, where drugs are in the control of that person's life. Right. And how does that interact with the recovery wheel? All right. In the crazy cycle of addiction, as we learned before, we've got the addict continues to use, and because they use, they abuse it. They're psychologically addicted, and then they're physically dependent on it. Okay, and that cycle continues to go and continues to go until something happens to stop it. All right, and the only way that we can get that crazy cycle to move the opposite direction is to admit that you have a problem. You quit using. We talked about the withdrawal issue, so I don't have that on the screen there. But the withdrawal and the detox is going to happen, but that's a short period of time, and then I'm in recovery. And so I will stay in recovery as long as I continue to admit that I have a problem. I continue to choose not to use the drug, and then I continue to stay in recovery. But notice how close recovery and physical dependence are in that circle. They're right next to each other. So it doesn't take very long for someone to go back to the crazy cycle. All right. The problem with going back through the crazy cycle is that when you go through the recovery process, now you're going to have to go through the withdrawal symptoms and the detox all over again. All right, and it's back and forth, and that's unfortunately a very common occurrence because these two cycles kind of interlink. Because a person who's in recovery is still addicted, and that's something that's very important for an addict to understand, is that addiction is not going to go away. So that's where the constant admitting and quitting have to be a part of the treatment plan forever. And as they learn how to live without the drug, it gets a lot easier. But initially is where it gets tougher, and they have to learn how to work through stress, and they have to learn how to communicate, and they have to learn all these different things that maybe they weren't used to doing because they were always high or drunk or whatever the situation may be. All right, and so that's kind of the difference between the crazy cycle and the treatment wheel in terms of how you maintain sobriety over the lifetime. Now, what's an easier way to maintain sobriety is to not start. Remember, we talked about this already. The easiest way to quit using a drug and to maintain sobriety is to never start using a drug, protecting yourself from those experiences. And so that's the big advice to give you guys, is instead of going through all these crazy cycles and risking all of this, just don't start. That's the best thing I can tell you to do. All right? All right, that's all I got for you. Literally, this is the last vodcast for the semester. It's been quite a ride, so log in, take your quiz on Kia, and remember, don't do anything stupid. All right? All right, we'll catch you in class tomorrow.
It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life.